What's up YouTube, Jeremiah Hersey here, and today is the 6th episode of my No to Pro series, and we're talking about grouping columns. You might want to group columns because you want to find some type of aggregate within inside of the columns that you have in the table. You might want to find the maximum value for a specific grouping of values, and so we're going to talk about how to use the group by function within inside of the Power Query Editor. If you'd like to follow along, if you look in the description down below, there is a link to download the PBI file that we're working with, and you can go ahead and follow along. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So here we are inside the Power BI desktop, and we're still working inside the Power Query Editor, so we're just going to click on Transform Data. This will take us back inside the Power Query Editor where we can continue working. I do want to just note here that although we're doing a lot inside the Power Query Editor, you want to try to minimize how many steps that you have for each one of these queries or tables. The more steps you have, the longer it's going to take to process, and as you get into the millions of rows of data, it's going to take longer and longer to process that data. So when you can, you want to try to minimize the steps here in the applied steps section. Now, we're doing a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily required for this data set, but I just want to go through the Power Query Editor and show you the different functionality within inside of it. So just note, most of these steps, probably these last 6 here, could be deleted and we could move on with building our data model, but I just want to show all the functionality within inside of here. So today we're going to be talking about this function here at the top, the group by function. So the group by function allows you to aggregate values and group them based on in a specific manner. Now before we get started, I do want to clean this table up a little bit so that we can kind of get an idea of what we'll be doing. So as we talked about before in the previous video, I'm going to use this choose columns UI here. It allows us to remove the columns and see all the columns with inside the table. It makes it easy for selection. So I'm going to remove color 2 and size 2, selling and buying package. I'm going to remove most of these out of here. All right, so these are the ones that I'm going to keep. So all the ones with the check marks, once again, are the columns that we're going to keep with inside of here. And we're going to click OK. So notice within inside of our stock item table here that we have a bubble wrap dispenser. Now we can see that these are the same size, right? Resulting in the same price. But as we move further down, we can see that, okay, this 32 millimeter anti-static bubble wrap actually has different prices, right? So there's 3 different prices here for that. That's the unit price. And then over here we have the retail sales price. And that's because of the fact that they have different sizes. So what we want to do here is we just want to get an average price for a bubble wrap dispenser. So we want an average unit price and an average recommended retail price. So we'll start with the first one. We just want to get an average unit price for the stock item name. Something we need to be aware of is that as we use these columns, notice this stock item key identifies the specific value associated to that item. So 32 bubble wrap, but it's also blue and 50 meters. And so as we include this in our grouping, it is going to cause it to pull that exact value if we use the grouping function. So let's go ahead and see that happen here. So we're going to select the group by function here at the top of the screen. Okay, and so the first thing we're doing is we're just going to group by the stock item name. Okay, so we're going to group the stock item name. We want an average unit price and an average retail price. So we're going to group our table. Now with this group by function, there are 2 different options here. that you can see, there is a basic and advanced. If we're just going to be grouping by one column, such as stock item name, we can use the basic functionality. So we're going to go to the stock item name. And then here is the aggregation that we're going to be using. So we're going to get an average. So I'm going to call this average price. Then we can choose our aggregation. I'm going to choose an average here. And then we get to choose the column that we want to average. In my case, I want to do the unit price as our first aggregation. Okay, so stock item name, we want to find the average unit price based on this name. So we'll go ahead and click OK. All right, so notice we now get our bubble wrap dispenser, just one, okay, with an average price for that. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and you have to understand the relationship for these items to work. Remember, over in the applied steps section, anytime we have this gear icon, it means that we can modify that step. And so we're going to modify this grouped rows step rather than deleting this step. Okay, we're just going to modify it using the gear icon. So watch what happens. We're going to go to advanced here. We're going to click on the gear icon. We're going to shift over to the advanced option for the group by. So this allows you to add multiple columns instead of just one. So watch what happens when I add the key. Remember, the key is the identifier for the stock item. So when I add the stock item key here, that's all I'm adding, is adding a grouping, and click OK. Notice that we now get the 3 bubble wrap dispensers again because each of them have their own key. And then it's finding the average price. Well, the average price is actually just the same as the unit price for that item. So as you add these groupings in, just understand that if it breaks it down to a lower level, becomes more granular, then it is going to find that exact price. Okay, so I'm just going to remove this here. So we just want to base it off the stock item name. So we wanted an average unit price. I can also, with the advanced option, add an aggregation, which I want to do, because we wanted an average retail price as well. All right, so I'm going to select average here of the recommended retail price, and I'm going to click OK. All right, so notice we now start to get those aggregations based on just the name alone. So it's not basing it off the individual stock item key, which breaks down the prices to their individual prices. It's now aggregating it based on the name itself. And so we're going to see a couple changes here. So this is the average unit price and the average retail price. Now you can change the aggregation. Maybe I want to find the maximum retail price. So I want to find the average, but I also want to find the maximum as well. So I can go in here to the grouped rows. Once again, clicking that gear icon allows you to modify the step, and I can add an aggregation. So I can say this is max retail price. And then I can find the maximum based on that aggregation as well. And so we'll see a little price change difference here. So while the average retail price is 92, the max retail price for the 32 millimeter bubble wrap is 156. Now that's dependent upon the size, right? The sizes were different. If we go back in time, remember you can always go back in time by clicking further ahead or further up in the applied step section. So going back here, we can see that 32 bubble wrap right there has that 50 meter, right? That was that price difference, is the size here. So that's what's going on here with inside of the grouped rows. And so you have the ability to modify these aggregations. You can pull in other groupings as well. And so once again, remember, as you add these groupings, so let's maybe group by color here. Okay, it's going to break it down even further, become more granular. And so you just need to be aware that when you break it down by color, the values, okay, are going to change based on how it's grouped. So now it's not only grouped by stock item name, but also by color as well. And so we can see we get the 3 bubble wrap dispensers back again. So just be aware that as you use this group by function, the aggregations are going to change based on the columns that you introduce for grouping. I want to thank you so much for joining me. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content. I'll see you in the next one.